My son texted, "We need space from you. Please don't reach out anymore at all." So I just, before the story unfolds, hit like, share it with your friends, and subscribe to join our storytelling family. My name's Walter Dean, though most folks just called me Walt back when people still called to say things instead of typing them. I'm 76 years old this past June, retired mechanic, widower, father of one, grandfather of two. At least I used to be part of their lives. These days, I suppose I'm more like a ghost with a pulse, hovering around the edges of people's phones. I still live in the same small house at the edge of Maple Creek, Ohio. 2 bedrooms, old siding, a porch that leans just enough to make every visitor test their balance. I built that porch myself in '89 when my wife Marlene said she wanted a place to sit and watch the world slow down. She got her wish, though maybe not in the way she imagined. The world slowed down plenty. It just forgot to take us with it. Anyway, that's where I was, right there on that same porch, one Thursday morning when it happened. The day had started ordinary enough. Coffee black, no sugar. The newspaper folded like it had secrets. Birds fighting over the same crust I always toss out. The kind of morning where you feel invisible in a good way. Then my phone buzzed on the table, just one short vibration. It was from my son Eddie. Now that wouldn't have been strange, except I hadn't heard from him in almost 3 weeks. Ever since his family moved up near Cleveland, it's been like we live on different planets. We used to talk every Sunday, a call after church, sometimes video so I could see the grandkids. But lately, the calls had turned into texts, then shorter texts, then nothing at all. So when I saw his name pop up that morning, my heart did that dumb little jump it still does when hope mistakes itself for habit. I opened the message. It said, "We need space from you. Please don't reach out anymore at all." Just like that. No greeting, no explanation, not even his usual dad. I stared at the screen for a long time. Thought maybe it was a prank or a wrong number, or maybe he'd been hacked. But no, it was from him. The words sat there plain as day, and they didn't change no matter how many times I blinked. I tried reading it slow, as if taking it apart might make it mean something softer. "We need space from you. Okay, please don't reach out anymore at all." That part landed like a shovel to the chest. My first instinct, old habits die hard, was to reply right away. Ask what was wrong, what I'd done, who was upset. But I stopped myself. If a man tells you not to reach out and you reach anyway, well, maybe you prove his point. So I didn't. Instead, I just sat there with the phone cooling in my palm like a piece of bad news you can't quite hand back. Marlene would have known what to do. She always had that touch, the way she could step into a storm and talk it into rain. But she'd been gone 6 years now. Cancer took her quiet and quick, like someone flipping off a porch light in the middle of a story. Since then, it's just been me, the house, and whatever memories haven't packed up and left yet. I thought about calling my sister Joanne, but she's not the kind you go to for comfort. She means well, but she's got this way of turning every hurt into a lesson. "Well, Walt," she'd say, "what did you do to make them feel that way?" As if there's always a reason, as if love needs paperwork. So I did what I always do when I don't know what else to do. I got busy. I mowed the lawn, even though it didn't need mowing, trimmed the edges, swept the porch, cleaned the gutters, all while that sentence ran laps in my head. Please don't reach out anymore at all. I kept thinking about the last time Eddie and I saw each other. It was about a month back. His family had come down for the weekend. I'd grilled burgers, overcooked a few, the way grandpas do. The kids, Lily and Max, had played in the yard, and I'd shown them the old tire swing. I fixed up. Everything seemed fine. Eddie had been quiet, but he's always been the serious type, more like his mother. His wife, Sarah, smiled polite, but didn't say much either. I thought maybe she just had a headache. But now, looking back, maybe they were already pulling away, one quiet mile at a time. That night I didn't sleep much. I kept replaying old conversations in my head, trying to find the crack, the moment something shifted. Maybe it was the time I told Eddie he shouldn't take that new job because it'd keep him away from the kids too much. Or maybe it was when I gave Lily $20 for her report card and Sarah said they were trying to teach her about earning things. Could it have been that small? Could that tiny thing snowball into silence? Morning came, and I still hadn't replied. I made breakfast, eggs and toast, though I only ate half. The rest went cold while I stared at that text again, as if the letters might change shape under sunlight. By noon, I finally did what I swore I wouldn't. I texted back, just one line. "Okay, son, I understand. I'll give you space. Always love you." Then I turned the phone face down and went for a walk. There's this trail behind the house that leads down to the creek. Not much of a trail anymore, really. More of a path memory keeps open. Marlene used to walk it every evening. I followed it like she used to, with the grass brushing my jeans and the air smelling like wet leaves and something older. At the creek, I sat on a log and skipped a few stones. I hadn't done that in years. My arms still knew the motion, though the throws didn't go far. The water just swallowed them up like it was tired of listening. I thought about Eddie when he was little, how he used to follow me everywhere, tugging my shirt and asking, "What's that, Dad?" about everything from carburetors to clouds. He had this hungry kind of curiosity that made you proud and scared all at once. I remembered teaching him how to fix his first bike, how proud he looked, grease all over his face. I wondered when exactly he stopped needing me. Maybe that's how it happens, not with a fight or a moment, but with a message years later saying we need space. When I got home, there was no new text, no missed call, just silence. And you know, silence has a sound when you're alone long enough. It's not quiet, not really. It's a kind of hum that fills every corner, like the house is breathing heavier than you. That night, I pulled out the old photo albums. I don't know why I did it. Maybe to remind myself that I hadn't imagined it all. There we were. Eddie's 10th birthday, his first baseball game, the day we dropped him off at college. All those moments, frozen mid-laugh, mid-life. I found one picture of him holding baby Lily, his face soft and proud, and I remembered what he said then. "I just hope I don't mess her up." And I'd laughed, told him no one gets out of parenthood clean. Maybe that laugh came off wrong. Maybe he thought I meant you will. It's strange, isn't it? How love can turn into distance without anyone meaning it to. I went to bed late, but before I turned off the light, I looked at that text one more time. I almost deleted it. Like deleting it might undo it. But I didn't. I just set the phone on the nightstand and said, out loud, "All right, son, you win. I'll be quiet." I didn't know then that silence has a way of inviting other voices in, ones you thought you'd forgotten. Because the very next morning something strange happened, something I couldn't quite explain. When I stepped onto the porch, there was an envelope sitting on the top step. No stamp, no name, just my address written in neat blue ink. I bent down, knees cracking like old wood, and picked it up. The handwriting wasn't Eddie's, but it looked familiar somehow. Inside was a short note, no greeting, just a line that said, "You don't know the whole story. Please don't give up." I must have read that note a dozen times, trying to make sense of it. Because if Eddie had told me to stay away and someone else was telling me not to, then somewhere in between there was a truth waiting to be found. And I guess that's when it all really began. I sat there on that porch step a long while, turning that note over in my hands like maybe it'd explain itself if I just held it long enough. The paper was thick. Not the kind from a printer, but something you'd find in a nice stationery box. The ink was blue, written in tidy loops and careful strokes, the kind of handwriting that says the person learned to write back when penmanship still mattered. I didn't recognize it right away, though there was something about the way the P in please curled that tugged at a corner of memory. No return address, no envelope stamp, which meant whoever left it had come all the way up my front steps. I glanced around the yard, half expecting to see someone ducking behind a bush or peeking from the mailbox. Nothing. Just the soft hum of the morning, the sound of a neighborhood too busy with its own lives to notice mine. I set the note on the porch table and poured myself another cup of coffee, but my hands were shaking just enough to spill some on the wood. Now, a younger version of me might have called Eddie right then and demanded answers. But something about that message, both of them really, told me to wait. I didn't want to make things worse by stomping through whatever this was. So instead, I decided to pay attention. You see, one thing you learn when you get old is that sometimes life doesn't whisper until you stop talking. I went through my morning chores, but my mind kept circling back to that envelope. You don't know the whole story. What story? What was there to not know? After lunch, I sat at the kitchen table and spread out the few things that might give me a clue. The text from Eddie, the note, a few old letters I'd saved from when he was in college, back before email made words disposable. I compared the handwriting, but it wasn't his. Then a thought hit me. Sarah. I hadn't seen her handwriting much, but I remembered a thank you card she'd sent me once after Lily's birthday party. Something about it had the same clean loops, the same care. If it was her, then what was she trying to tell me? By 3 o'clock, curiosity had won out over common sense. I got in my truck, old red Ford faithful as a dog, and drove toward Cleveland. It's about 2 hours up, give or take. Enough time for regret to ride shotgun. The whole way I argued with myself. What are you doing? Walt, he told you not to reach out. You're going to make things worse. Then the other voice, quieter but stubborn, said, he also said we need space. Maybe she doesn't agree. So I kept driving. When I got close to their neighborhood, I pulled over at a gas station. My heart was thumping like I'd robbed a bank instead of just visiting my son's street. I bought a cup of burnt coffee and stood outside the car, thinking. If I showed up uninvited, I might end up the villain in whatever story I didn't know. But if I turned back, I'd be wondering forever what that note meant. So I compromised. I wouldn't knock. I'd just drive by, make sure they were all right, see what my gut told me. When I turned onto their street, I slowed down. The houses were all new. Clean driveways, small trees still held up by stakes, kids' bikes lined like decorations. Eddie's house was the one with the blue shutters, looked nice, looked happy. A minivan was in the driveway, Sarah's, I assumed. Eddie's black sedan was gone. Maybe he was at work. I rolled past, telling myself I'd just keep going. But then I saw something in the front yard. A small wooden birdhouse hanging crooked on a post. I'd made that birdhouse with Lily 2 summers ago. She'd painted it pink and purple, said it was for the bird princess. Seeing it there hit me harder than I expected. A part of me wanted to march up, fix that tilt, and tell them I still cared about the same small things. But instead, I just parked half a block down and sat there like a fool. That's when the front door opened. Sarah stepped out carrying a trash bag. She didn't see me at first, just walked it to the curb and tossed it in the bin. But then she stopped, turned, looked around like she felt someone watching. Our eyes met for maybe 2 seconds. I didn't wave. Neither did she. She froze for a moment, then gave the smallest nod, barely there, and went back inside. It was a strange nod. Not angry, not friendly either, just knowing, like she'd expected to see me. I drove off before Eddie came home. By the time I got back to Maple Creek, the sun was down and my shoulders ached from the long drive. But there was something else waiting on my porch. A second note. This one tucked under the flower pot. Same blue ink. Please don't come to the house again. I can't explain yet, but you were right about him needing help. My hands went cold. Needing help? I read that line over and over. Did she mean Eddie? What kind of help? I sat down in my porch chair, letter trembling in my grip, and tried to remember every conversation I'd ever had with my son that might point to this. He'd always been private, even as a kid. Never wanted to talk about feelings. When he was 12, he broke his wrist playing baseball, but told me it was fine until I noticed his hand swelling like a balloon. I had to drag him to the ER. Lately, I'd noticed that same stubborn quiet in his texts. Short answers, long pauses. The last time they visited, he'd barely looked me in the eye. When I asked about work, he just said, "It's fine," and changed the subject. But I figured he was just tired. Everyone's tired these days. That night, I couldn't shake it. I barely slept. I kept thinking, if Sarah's leaving notes, she must want me to know something. But why not call? Why not say it straight, unless she couldn't? The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I prayed. Not the fancy kind, just a simple talk with God on the back porch while the sun came up. I said, Lord, if I'm supposed to do something, show me. If not, take this burden off my heart. Then I poured my coffee, and while I was halfway through the cup, I heard tires crunching on my driveway. A small silver sedan pulled up. Sarah got out. She stood there for a moment, scanning the yard like she wasn't sure she should have come. I didn't move. Didn't want to scare her off. Finally, she came up the steps, and I noticed how tired she looked. Not sick tired, just the kind that comes from too many nights keeping quiet. "Morning," I said softly. She nodded. "Can I come in for a minute?" "Of course." Inside, I motioned toward the kitchen table. She sat, hands clasped tight. I made coffee because that's what you do when you don't know what else to do. After a long silence, she said, "Eddie doesn't know I'm here." "I figured," I said. She looked down. "He's not doing well, Walt." I waited. "It started a while back," she went on. "Work's been rough. The company's been laying people off, and he's been scared, I think. But he won't talk about it. He's been short-tempered, withdrawn. Then a few weeks ago, She stopped, took a deep breath. "What happened?" I asked. She hesitated, eyes glassy. He yelled at Lily. Not just raised his voice, really yelled. Over spilled milk. She cried for an hour. I swallowed hard. "He felt terrible afterward," she said quickly. "He apologized, told me he didn't know what came over him. But since then, he's been avoiding everyone, especially you." "Me?" "He said you'd see right through him." That hit me like a truth I hadn't wanted to admit. She went on. "He's ashamed, Walt. He thinks he's failing as a husband and father. When you told him last month he shouldn't take the new job because it'd keep him away from the kids, he took it as, well, as you saying he already wasn't there enough. It broke something." I rubbed my forehead. "I didn't mean it like that. I was just worried." "I know," she said softly, "but Eddie's been fragile. He's been seeing a therapist, but he's still struggling. Last week he said he couldn't handle any more pressure or judgment, even from people who love him. That's when he sent that text." "So it wasn't you," I murmured. She shook her head. "No, I didn't know until after. I wanted to call you, but he checks my phone sometimes. He's not trying to control me. He's just paranoid about everything lately. So I left the notes instead." I sat there in silence, the whole picture slowly rearranging itself. My son wasn't cutting me off out of anger. He was drowning, and this was how drowning looked for him. After a while I asked, "What kind of help does he need?" She sighed. "He needs patience, space, yes, but not abandonment. Someone who won't push, won't preach, just presence." I nodded slowly. "I can do that." She gave a faint smile. "I knew you'd understand." Before she left, she said, "Please don't tell him I came here, not yet. Just keep being there quietly. I'll find a way to bring you back in when he's ready." When she drove off, I stood in the doorway watching her taillights disappear down the road. I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. A kind of purpose. Not the loud, busy kind you get from fixing things or building something, but the quieter kind that comes from waiting with love. The next few weeks were strange. I didn't call Eddie, didn't text. I just went about my days. Mowing the lawn, feeding the birds, fixing small things that didn't need fixing. But every night I'd write a letter to him I never sent. Some nights it was just a page. Some nights 3 or 4. I'd tell him about the weather, about the creek, about how I missed him. I didn't try to fix anything. I just told the truth. By the end of each letter, I'd sign it the same way. "Still here, son. Always will be." I kept them all in a shoebox under my bed. Then about a month later, something unexpected happened again. It was a Friday evening. I was sitting on the porch with a beer, the kind of quiet dusk where the air feels heavy with memory. My phone buzzed. A message from Eddie. My heart nearly stopped. "Dad, can we talk soon?" I stared at it for a long minute before replying. "Of course, whenever you're ready." He didn't answer right away. But that night, I slept better than I had in weeks. The next morning, the phone rang. When I picked it up, there was silence at first. Then his voice, shaky and low. "Hey, Dad. Hey, son." He took a breath. "I'm sorry for that message. I was in a bad place. Still kinda am." "It's all right," I said. "I figured something was going on." "Mom would have known what to say," he murmured. "Yeah," I said, smiling sadly. "She always did." We talked for a while. Nothing heavy at first, just small things. The kids, the weather, the truck I was still refusing to sell. Then finally he said, "I think I need help, Dad. Real help." "I'm proud of you for saying that," I told him. "You don't have to do it alone." He was quiet for a bit, then said softly, "Thanks for giving me space." "Always," I said. "Space doesn't mean distance, son, just room to breathe." We talked another half hour before he said he had to go pick up the kids. But before hanging up, he said, "Maybe we can visit soon. The kids miss you." After we hung up, I sat on the porch watching the sunset, that same golden light Marlene used to love. The world hadn't fixed itself, but something had shifted, a bridge maybe, rebuilt plank by plank in silence. And as I sat there, I thought about how sometimes love doesn't shout, doesn't demand, doesn't even move fast. Sometimes it just waits, patiently, quietly, like a porch light left on in case somebody decides to come home. But I didn't know then that one more twist was coming, one that would test everything I thought I'd learned about forgiveness and holding on. Eddie didn't come by right away. He said he needed to get some things sorted first, and I told him that was fine. I meant it too. For once in my life, I wasn't in a rush to fix things. I'd learned that some problems don't respond to wrenches and lectures. They just need time and quiet faith. A couple weeks went by. I kept busy, or at least the kind of busy retired men call busy. I'd go into town, grab groceries, talk too long with the cashier. I'd spend afternoons in the garage, tinkering with an old lawnmower that had no real reason to live except giving me something to do. Every evening I'd sit on the porch with the radio on low, waiting for the sound of a car that might be his. Funny how you can wait without even meaning to. Then one Saturday morning I heard tires crunching on the gravel driveway. I looked up from my newspaper, and there he was, standing next to his car, hands in his pockets like a boy about to come home after running away. For a second, neither of us moved. Then I stood, slow and careful, like approaching a deer you don't want to spook. "Hey, son," I said. "Hey, Dad." He looked older than the last time I saw him. Not just tired, older. Lines across his forehead that hadn't been there before. Eyes that didn't quite settle anywhere. But there was something gentler in him, too, like a man who's been humbled by the weight he's been carrying. "Coffee's on," I said. "Still take it black?" "Yeah," he said quietly. Inside, I poured 2 mugs, and we sat at the kitchen table. Same place he used to do his homework as a kid. Same dent in the wood where he once dropped a hammer trying to fix his toy truck. For a while, we just sat in that familiar silence. Sometimes silence says more than words can. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Sarah told you, didn't she?" I didn't pretend to misunderstand. "She told me a little, enough to know you've been having a hard time." He nodded, eyes fixed on his coffee. "Yeah, that's one way to put it." I waited. He took a deep breath and said, "I didn't mean that text, Dad. Not really. I just felt like I was failing at everything. Work, home, being a husband, being a dad. And I thought cutting off everyone who made me feel worse about it would help." "I didn't mean to make you feel worse," I said softly. "I know. But when you said not to take that job, it felt like confirmation of every fear I already had. Like even you thought I wasn't doing right." I nodded slowly. "I get it now. I should have trusted you to make your own choices." He rubbed his hands together, the way he used to when he was nervous as a kid. "The truth is, I didn't even like that job. I took it because I thought it'd make me feel like I was doing better than I was. Turns out money doesn't fix feeling lost. That's something most men don't figure out till their knees start aching," I said with a small smile. That got a faint laugh out of him, just a breath of it. But it was enough to crack the heaviness between us. We talked for a long while that morning. About nothing big, really, just catching up on little pieces of life. Lily's new dance recital, Max's obsession with dinosaurs, how the garage door at his house kept sticking, normal things, comfortable things. Before he left, he said, "We're coming back next weekend. The kids want to see the creek." "Would love that," I said, and I meant it more than I could ever say. After he drove off, I sat there for a long time just staring down the empty road, trying not to smile too hard. It felt like sunlight finally touching a part of me that'd been in shadow too long. That next weekend, true to his word, Eddie came back, this time with Sarah and the kids. When the car pulled up, Lily came running out first, all legs and laughter, her hair flying behind her. Max followed, holding a toy T-Rex that was missing an arm. "Grandpa!" they shouted together. There's no medicine in the world like that word. I knelt down and they nearly tackled me. Sarah came up the steps carrying a bag of groceries. "Figured we'd make lunch here," she said. "Music to my ears." I told her. Eddie followed behind, slower, but with that quiet smile that told me maybe things were starting to heal. We spent the morning down by the creek. The kids tossed rocks, Max pretending they were meteors, Lily trying to find frogs. Eddie sat beside me on a log, both of us looking out over the water that seen more family memories than any photo album could hold. "She really loves it here," he said, nodding toward Lily. "Your mom always said this place had good air." I said, "Cleans out whatever's stuck in you." He smiled faintly. "Guess I could use some of that." I didn't say anything, just let the quiet do the talking. After lunch, Sarah took the kids inside to help make brownies, which, judging by the noise and laughter, mostly meant they were covering the kitchen in flour. Eddie stayed on the porch with me. The afternoon sun was warm, a soft breeze moving through the trees. He said, "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "When Mom got sick, were you angry? I mean, at God or life or whatever?" The question caught me off guard. I looked out at the yard before answering. "Yeah," I said, "I was. Not at first. At first I was just scared, then tired, then angry. At her for getting sick, at myself for not fixing it, at God for letting it happen. I think I stayed mad longer than I should have." "How'd you stop?" "I didn't. Not really. I just realized anger's like holding your breath. Sooner or later you either let it go or pass out." He nodded, staring down at his hands. "I've been angry a lot lately, mostly at myself. Sometimes at Sarah, sometimes at the kids for no reason. I hate it." "That's not who you are, son," I said. "You're just lost in it right now. Happens to the best of us." He didn't respond right away, just let out a long sigh. "Dad," he said finally, "you think it's too late to make things right?" I looked at him, this man who used to fit in my arms, and said, "No, son, never too late. That's the thing about family. It's the only thing that forgives before you even ask." He nodded slowly, eyes wet. Then he said, "Thanks for not giving up on me." I smiled. "I tried that once, remember? Didn't take." We both laughed, and for a moment it felt like time folded back on itself, like we were both younger, both lighter. They stayed through Sunday. The house came alive again. Toys scattered, music playing, the smell of Sarah's brownies lingering long after the kids were in bed. That night, after everyone turned in, Eddie came out to the porch again. The moon was bright enough to make the yard glow faintly. He said, "I've been thinking about getting help beyond therapy, maybe taking some time off work. Sarah thinks it's a good idea." I nodded. "I think it's a great idea." He hesitated, then added, "Thing is, we might need to stay here for a bit, just till we get back on our feet." I didn't even let him finish. "The door's open, always has been." He smiled, a real one this time. "Thanks, Dad." They moved in 2 weeks later, not for long, just while Eddie took a leave from his job. The house, once quiet as a museum, was suddenly alive again. Cereal boxes left open, cartoons in the background, tiny socks on the laundry line. And you know what? I loved it. Every bit of it. Eddie started helping me around the property, fixing the fence, repainting the porch railing. We didn't talk about deep things much after that. Not every day, at least. Some days we just worked side by side in silence, and that was enough. Sarah found peace, too, I think. She'd sit by the window in the evenings, reading while the kids drew on the floor. The way she'd look at Eddie, patient, steady, I knew she loved him even through his cracks. But it wasn't all easy. Healing never is. One night, I woke up to the sound of raised voices. I stood in the hallway, heart thudding, listening to muffled arguing from their room. I couldn't make out all the words, but I heard enough. Frustration, exhaustion, fear. Then I heard a sob. I started to move toward the door, but stopped myself. This wasn't my moment to fix. This was theirs to survive. The next morning, the air in the house felt heavy. Sarah kept busy making pancakes, the kids chattering as if nothing had happened. Eddie sat at the table, quiet, eyes rimmed red. When the kids ran outside, I sat across from him. "Rough night?" He nodded. "We're trying, Dad. Some days it's just hard to hold everything together." "Then don't," I said. "Let it fall apart if it needs to. Sometimes things gotta break before they fit right again." He looked at me, and for the first time in a long time, I saw not just my son, but a man trying to rebuild himself one truth at a time. That day we drove into town together, picked up lumber, got ice cream on the way back. It wasn't a big day, but it was a good one. That night he came out to the porch again, hands in his pockets. "Dad, do you ever think about Mom still?" "Every day," I said, "but it's not the same kind of thinking as before. It's not pain anymore, more like gratitude. for what we had, not what I lost. He nodded. I want to get there someday. You will, I said. Just takes time, and a little forgiveness, mostly for yourself. He was quiet for a bit, then said, You're a good man, Dad. I chuckled. You must be tired to say something that untrue. He laughed. No, really, I mean it. I didn't see it before, but you've always just been there. I didn't realize how much that mattered. Well, I said, guess we're both slow learners. They stayed about 3 months in total. Long enough for laughter to return to the house like it never left. Long enough for Eddie to look like himself again. When they finally packed up to head home, the porch looked emptier than it had in years. Before getting in the car, Eddie hugged me, long and hard. Thanks for everything, Dad. Just doing my job, I said. As they pulled out of the driveway, Lily waved from the back seat. Bye, Grandpa. We'll be back next weekend. I waved until the car disappeared down the road. When the dust settled and the yard went quiet, I stood there a moment, feeling the ache that comes from both loss and peace. Inside, the house felt too still again, but this time it wasn't loneliness. It was fullness. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat on the porch as the sun went down, that soft orange light stretching across the yard like a blessing. And just when I thought the day had closed, my phone buzzed. A text from Eddie. Dad, there's something I never told you about Mom's last days. Can I come by tomorrow? I stared at the message, the old ache stirring in my chest. Some stories take a lifetime to tell, and some truths wait until the heart is ready to hear them. I texted back, Of course, son. Porch light's on. And as the night settled in, I had a feeling whatever he was about to tell me would change how I remembered everything that came before. Eddie showed up early the next morning, earlier than I expected, before the sun had even burned the mist off the yard. I was on the porch with my first cup of coffee, the air still cool enough to make you glad for it. He pulled into the driveway, cut the engine, and just sat there for a while, like a man talking himself into walking through a door he knows he can't close again. When he finally got out, I could tell it was going to be one of those talks. His eyes had that heavy look, the kind that comes from too little sleep and too much remembering. Morning, son, I said softly. Morning, Dad. He sat down beside me on the porch steps, same spot where he used to sit with scraped knees and big questions about the universe. Only this time the question looked like it hurt to hold. I didn't rush him. I just sat there sipping coffee, watching the sunlight move slow across the yard. After a minute he said, You sure you want to hear this? I wouldn't have told you to come if I wasn't, I said. He nodded, took a long breath, and began. When Mom got sick, you remember how quick everything happened? The chemo, the hospital trips, the way it all just sped up? I nodded. I remember every bit of it. Well, he said quietly, there's something I never told you about those last few weeks. He rubbed his hands together, looking down. Mom told me not to. That made my chest tighten. Not to tell me what? He looked up, eyes red-rimmed. That she stopped the treatments before the doctors did. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. Stopped? He nodded. She told me she couldn't do it anymore, that it wasn't living, it was waiting to die slower. She asked me not to tell you because she said you'd try to fight it, and she didn't have the strength left for another argument. I didn't say anything. Couldn't. My throat had gone dry. He kept talking, voice trembling. She made me promise, Dad, said it was her choice and she wanted to spend what time she had left being herself, not a patient. She made me take her to that cabin near Lake Erie. Remember the one you two used to rent some summers? I nodded slowly, the image flickering in my mind like an old film reel. That cabin, one room, tiny kitchen, big window looking over the lake. Marlene used to love it there. She spent her last weekend there, Eddie said, just reading, listening to the waves, drinking tea. She told me not to call you till after, said she didn't want you to see her like that. She said you deserved to remember her the way she was. The words hit me harder than I expected. I'd always blamed myself for not being there at the very end, for falling asleep in the hospital room and waking up to find her gone. But now, son, I whispered, you mean she chose to go? He nodded, tears running down his face now. Yeah, peacefully, on her own terms. She asked me to tell you someday when it wouldn't break you. I sat back in my chair, the weight of it pressing into my chest like a slow tide. All these years I'd carried around guilt like a stone in my pocket, thinking I'd failed her by not being there, thinking maybe if I'd stayed awake or fought harder, she'd have had one more day. And all along she'd made her peace without me. For a while, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the hum of the morning, the birds, the far-off sound of a neighbor's mower starting up. Finally I said, "You did right by her, Eddie." He shook his head. "No, I didn't. I lied to you. For 6 years, every time you talked about those last days, every time you said you wished you could have been there, I just stood there and nodded. I couldn't carry it anymore, Dad. It's been eating at me." I reached over and put my hand on his shoulder. "You kept a promise. That's not lying. That's love, son. Hard love." He looked at me like he didn't believe it. "Your mom," I went on, "was the most stubborn woman I ever knew. If she said that's what she wanted, then I believe she knew best. I just wish she'd told me herself, but maybe she knew I wouldn't let her." Eddie wiped his eyes with his sleeve. "She said you'd fight her on it." "She was right," I said, managing a small laugh through the ache. "I would have argued with her till she missed her own death." That got a weak smile out of him. We sat there in silence for a long time. Finally I said, "Thank you for telling me. It hurts, but it's a good kind of hurt, the kind that lets the air back in." He nodded. "I was scared you'd be mad." "No," I said, "just grateful for the truth, for you being there with her when I couldn't be." He let out a shaky breath, like he'd been holding it for 6 years. "Feels strange," he said quietly, "like losing her all over again, but also like finally setting her free." "Yeah," I said softly. "That's what forgiveness feels like. Never comes easy, but it's the only thing worth carrying." We spent the rest of the morning talking about Marlene, about those last months, about things we'd both avoided saying for too long. He told me how she'd made him promise to look after me. "She said you'd act tough, but that you'd fall apart when no one was looking," he said. Well, she wasn't wrong. She also said you'd be the one to hold the family together when she was gone. I guess she knew we'd drift. "Families always do," I said. "What matters is finding the way back." When he left that day, it wasn't with that heavy look he'd had when he arrived. He looked lighter somehow. Like a man who'd finally set something down he'd carried too long. After his car disappeared down the road, I sat there on the porch, that note of hers still echoing in my head. "You don't know the whole story. Please don't give up." Back then I'd thought Sarah wrote it. Now I wondered if maybe, in some way, it came from somewhere higher up. That night I went digging through the old box where I kept Marlene's things. It had been years since I opened it. Inside were the usual bits of memory, photos, recipes in her handwriting, the small wooden cross she kept by the bed. At the bottom, folded neat as always, was a letter with my name on it. I hadn't seen it before. My hands trembled a little as I unfolded it. The paper was yellowed slightly, but the handwriting was unmistakably hers, round, firm, steady. It said, "Walt, if you're reading this, then I finally got my way, and you're letting me rest. I'm sorry for leaving you without goodbye. I just couldn't stand watching your eyes every time the doctor said another number. I needed my last memory of you to be alive, not waiting for me to die. Don't be mad at Eddie. He did what I asked. You did too, in your own way. You loved me with every ounce you had, and I felt it, even when I couldn't say much. Promise me you'll keep living, Walt. Don't just survive. Live. Go to the creek. Fix something. Teach Lily how to fish. Tell Eddie that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering without pain. I'll see you by the lake someday. I'll be the one waving. Love, Marlene." By the time I finished reading, the page was blurry from tears I hadn't realized were falling. I don't cry often, never have, but that night I sat there with the letter in my lap and let it all come out. Not just sadness, but relief, gratitude, the whole mess of it. When it was done, I felt empty and clean, like the world had exhaled with me. I folded the letter back carefully and set it on the table beside the old photo of her smiling by the lake. "Guess you always get the last word," I whispered, and for the first time in a long time I didn't feel alone. The next few weeks passed gentle. Eddie called more often, not out of guilt anymore, but just to talk. Sometimes Sarah joined in. Sometimes the kids grabbed the phone and told me every detail of their day, every scrape and victory. Life started feeling normal again. Not the old normal, but something new and softer. One afternoon, Eddie came down again with Lily, just the two of them. He said, "Thought maybe you could show her how to fish like you used to show me." I grinned. "Thought you'd never ask." We walked down to the creek with a couple of old rods. Lily wore a pink hat too big for her head, and her excitement reminded me so much of Marlene that it hurt in the best way. We sat by the water, me showing her how to bait the hook, how to cast. She listened, all focus and curiosity, just like her dad once did. After a while, she caught a small fish, maybe 6 inches long. You'd have thought she'd won the lottery. "Grandpa, look, I did it," I laughed. "You sure did. That one's dinner-sized, if you're a frog." Eddie chuckled behind me. "She's got the Dean patience," he said. "She's got your mother's luck," I replied. He smiled and looked out over the water. "You know, Dad, I think she'd be happy. About us. About all of this." "I think so, too," I said quietly. We watched Lily run along the bank, waving the rod around like a sword. Then Eddie said, "You ever think about what comes next, when you're gone?" I raised an eyebrow. "That a polite way of saying I'm getting old?" He laughed. "No, I just mean, what do you want us to do? With the house, I mean. The land." I thought about it for a bit. The porch, the trees, the creek, all the places that had carried our laughter, our arguments, our growing pains. "Keep it," I said finally. "Not because it's valuable, but because it remembers us. Every nail, every board, every quiet morning. This place raised more than one Dean. Maybe it'll raise a few more." He nodded. "I'd like that." That evening, after they left, I sat on the porch again, watching the last light fade behind the trees. The sky was painted that same golden color Marlene loved. I took out her letter again, read it once more, and then folded it back carefully. Sometimes I think the hardest part of growing old isn't losing people. It's realizing how much of them you still carry. Their laugh in your memory, their voice in your thoughts, their wisdom in your mistakes. That night I whispered a quiet thank you to Marlene, to Eddie, to whoever left that first note that set everything in motion. Because without it, I might have stayed stuck in silence. And as I turned off the porch light, I realized something. Forgiveness isn't just about others. Sometimes it's about forgiving yourself for all the years you didn't know better. I slept well that night. Deep, dreamless, peaceful. But in the morning I woke to the sound of knocking. Not Eddie this time. When I opened the door, there stood Joanne, my sister, holding a manila envelope and wearing that serious look she saves for bad news. "Morning, Walt," she said softly. "Can we talk?" Something in her voice told me the story wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. I hadn't seen Joanne in almost 2 years. We talk on birthdays and holidays, sure, but the last time she'd come to my door was when Marlene passed. That day she stood on this same porch holding a casserole dish and trying not to cry. Now she stood there again, only this time she was holding a manila envelope and looked more like a woman with news than a sister with a visit. "Morning, Joe," I said. "You look like you've been up since before the sun." She gave a tired smile. "Didn't sleep much. Mind if I come in?" "Of course not. Come on in." She stepped inside, that familiar soft perfume trailing in behind her. I'd forgotten how comforting that smell was. Something between lilacs and laundry soap. She sat down at the kitchen table without waiting to be asked, like she used to when we were kids. I poured her some coffee and sat across from her. "All right," I said, nodding toward the envelope. "What's in there?" She took a deep breath. "This came to my house yesterday, addressed to me, but your name was in the return corner. No return address, no postmark, just your name, written like Marlene used to." My stomach tightened. "Marlene's handwriting?" "Near enough to make me shake when I saw it," she said. "At first I thought maybe Eddie had mailed something old, but when I opened it—" She slid the envelope across the table to me. "Figured you should be the one to see it." I hesitated for a long time before picking it up. My hands weren't steady. They never are when ghosts come knocking. Inside was a folded letter, cream-colored paper, the kind Marlene used to keep in her writing desk. I unfolded it slowly. The handwriting, my God, it was hers. That looping M, the sharp line in the T, the way she dotted her I's just a little too high. It read, "Walt, if Joanne is handing you this, then it means I trusted her to wait until the time was right. There's one more thing you don't know, something I couldn't bear to tell you then. Please don't think less of me. I did what I thought was right at the time. Before the cancer, I found something in the old cedar chest. Letters. From you to someone named Anita. You never sent them, but you wrote them, and I read them. All of them. At first I was angry, hurt even. But then I realized you'd written them years before we even met. They were your way of saying goodbye to the life you had before me. Still, it stayed with me. That part of you I never knew, that first love you buried in words and never shared. I kept the letters, Walt. I couldn't throw them away. You once told me that love in any form deserves to be remembered. When you're ready, look under the floorboard beneath our old bed. There's a box there. I want you to find it, and when you do, I want you to tell me out loud that you forgive yourself. Love always, Marlene. I sat back in my chair, heart thumping hard against my ribs. Joanne watched me closely. You all right? Yeah, I said, though it came out thin. Who's Anita? She asked gently. I stared at the letter. The name alone was enough to drag up 40 years of dust I thought I'd long buried. She was. Someone I knew before Marlene, I said quietly. Long before. Joanne didn't press. She just nodded like she knew better than to crowd the truth. After she left, I sat there a long time with that letter spread out on the table, staring at the words until they blurred. Anita. I hadn't spoken that name in half a lifetime. I met her when I was 20, back when I thought love was supposed to burn like a match. Bright, fast, a little dangerous. She worked at a diner off Route 23, hair the color of coffee with too much cream, eyes that always looked like she was thinking of someplace else. We dated for 2 years, talked about getting married once before life started pulling us in opposite directions. She wanted Chicago, I wanted to stay put. In the end, she left without much ceremony. Just a note on my dashboard that said, "You're too good for small towns, Walt. Don't prove me right." I didn't handle it well. I wrote her letters, dozens of them, never sent a single one. They were more therapy than communication, words to fill the space where she'd been. When I met Marlene a few years later, I burned most of them, or thought I did. Guess I missed a few. And now, all these years later, she'd found them, read them. And instead of being angry, she'd hidden them away with a message about forgiveness. Damn woman never could stop teaching me lessons, even after she was gone. I spent most of that afternoon pacing the bedroom. The floor creaked like it was remembering me. The bed was still the same one we'd shared all those years. Frame solid oak, sheets neat as she'd have liked them. I knelt beside it and pulled up the edge of the carpet. Sure enough, there was a loose floorboard. My fingers trembled as I pried it up. Inside there was a small tin box, old, rusted around the edges. I lifted it out, blew off the dust, and opened it. Inside were maybe a dozen envelopes, yellowed, sealed, all in my handwriting. The top one had my name scrawled across it. To Anita, unsent. I sat on the edge of the bed and just stared. It was like holding a piece of another life. I opened one. The paper crackled as I unfolded it. Anita, I keep thinking if I write it down, I'll stop missing you. It hasn't worked yet. You left your sweater in my truck, the blue one. I wear it sometimes, even though it smells like smoke now. I thought I'd hate you for leaving, but I don't. I just hate that I didn't ask you to stay louder. Maybe one day I'll find someone who doesn't make me forget you, but makes remembering you hurt less. I folded it back up, slow. My younger self, raw, unsure, clinging to words instead of courage. Marlene must have read that, must have seen every flaw I tried to hide. And yet she stayed. I leaned back on the bed, the box resting on my chest, and for a long time, I just breathed. The air felt heavy but honest. I could almost hear her voice, not judging, not angry, just understanding. Forgive yourself, she'd written. So I said it out loud to no one and everyone all at once. I forgive myself. It felt strange at first, like saying someone else's prayer, but after a moment something inside me loosened, like an old knot coming undone. That night I took the box outside and sat by the fire pit. The air had that crisp edge of late summer, cicadas singing their tired song. I took each letter out one by one, read a few lines, then fed them to the flames. As the fire crackled, I spoke softly, not to Anita, not even to Marlene, but to myself. You were young. You didn't know better. You learned. You loved again. You did the best you could. When the last envelope turned to ash, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because I'd erased the past, but because I'd finally accepted it as mine. The next morning, Eddie called. He sounded brighter than usual. "Dad, we're thinking about having everyone over next weekend. Sarah wants to cook. Maybe we can finally do that family dinner we keep talking about." I smiled. "Sounds good to me. I'll bring dessert." He laughed. "You mean you'll buy dessert?" "Hey, I've got my pride," I said. "Might even make Marlene's cobbler if I can still remember how." Now that I'd pay to see, after we hung up, I stood by the window looking out over the yard. The sun was high, the sky that deep, clean blue that always made Marlene hum. And then I saw it, a small bird, a wren, perched on the porch rail. It tilted its head, chirped once, and flew off toward the woods. I don't put much stock in signs, but that one felt like a message delivered. That evening, Joanne called again. "You do okay after I left?" she asked. "I did more than okay," I said. "I did some cleaning, the kind you can't do with a broom." She chuckled softly. "I figured as much. You sound lighter." "I am." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You know, Marlene asked me to hold that envelope years ago. Said I'd know when to give it to you." "Why now?" I asked. Joanne took a deep breath. "Because last week I dreamed about her. First time in years. She was sitting by the lake, looking right at me, smiling. When I woke up, I found that envelope in my nightstand. I swear I've never seen it before." I didn't know what to say. Sometimes life hands you moments that don't need explaining. They just are. "Guess she knew the time was right," I said quietly. "Guess so." We didn't talk much more after that. Some things are better left in the quiet. A few nights later, I drove out to Lake Erie. Same cabin where Marlene spent her last weekend. The place hadn't changed much. Same old porch swing, same whisper of waves. I sat out there till the stars came out, listening to the water and thinking about how full life can be even after so much loss. I thought about Eddie and Lily and Sarah, about Joanne, about Marlene's letter, about how maybe forgiveness is what connects the past and the future, how it lets you keep walking even when the road's full of ghosts. Before I left, I took one of the smooth, flat stones from the shore and wrote for Marlene on it with a bit of charcoal from the fire pit. Then I tossed it into the lake. It disappeared with a small plunk, ripples spreading out until they were gone. And I swear, just for a second, I heard her laugh. Soft, far off, carried on the wind. When I got home, I noticed something tucked under my front door. Another envelope, no return address, just one line written across the front. "You did good, Walt." I opened it, empty inside. I stood there on the porch for a long time, the wind moving through the trees, and smiled. I kept that last envelope on the mantel. Didn't throw it away, didn't tuck it in a drawer, just let it sit there where I could see it every day. That little piece of mystery with 5 words written like a benediction. "You did good, Walt." Every time I walked past it, I'd catch myself glancing up, smiling just a little. Maybe it was from Marlene, maybe it wasn't. Didn't much matter anymore. It felt like permission, the kind you wait your whole life for and don't even realize until it's in your hands. The house had a new quiet about it after that. Not empty quiet, peaceful quiet, like it finally stopped holding its breath. Eddie's family came by more often, sometimes just to drop off leftovers, sometimes to spend a few hours. I could tell he wanted to keep an eye on me, though he was polite enough not to say it. Sarah started calling, too. She'd ask about the garden, about the dog that wasn't mine but had decided my porch was his territory. She even asked if I could help Lily with a school project, a family tree. Now that was a surprise. When I was a boy, family tree meant a chart full of names that didn't mean much. But when I sat down with Lily at the table, she had questions that weren't about names or dates. They were about stories. "Grandpa," she said, pencil in hand, "what was your dad like?" That one stopped me cold for a second. I hadn't thought about my father in years. He was a quiet man, carpenter by trade, drinker by habit, decent when he was sober. He worked long hours, said little, laughed even less. "He was steady," I said finally. "Didn't say much, but when he did, you listened. He built this porch with his own hands." "Did he teach you how?" "He tried," I said with a chuckle, "but I was too busy wanting to be anywhere else." She grinned. "Just like Dad says I am with homework." We both laughed. Then she asked, "What about Grandma Marlene?" That question brought a gentler kind of ache. She was sunlight, I said softly. Could walk into a room and make everyone in it believe they'd just been forgiven for something. Lily smiled, scribbling the words in the margin of her paper. Sunlight, she wrote in big letters. Then she looked up. Grandpa, are you happy? Kids have a way of asking things that adults tiptoe around for decades. I looked at her, really looked, and thought about everything that had happened this past year. The letter from Eddie, the truth about Marlene's last days, the box of old love letters, the note that said you did good. I think, I said, I'm finally learning how to be. She tilted her head. You mean you weren't before? I smiled. Sometimes grown-ups forget how. We get too busy worrying about what we lost instead of what's still here. She nodded thoughtfully, like she understood more than she should have to. When we finished, her family tree looked more like a living map. Notes, doodles, tiny hearts by names she liked. Under my name, she'd written, Grandpa Walt learned how to be happy again. I tell you, I almost lost it right there. That night after they'd gone, I sat on the porch again, like I always do when I've got too many thoughts bouncing around. The air smelled like rain. Somewhere down the road a dog barked and the world felt small and right. I thought about the years I'd spent not talking to Eddie. All the stubborn pride that built walls between us for no reason worth the cost, and I thought about that text, the one that started it all. We need space from you. Please don't reach out anymore at all. For a long time I hated those words. They felt like exile, like being erased from my own family. But sitting there that night, with Lily's drawing still fresh in my mind, I realized something simple but true. Maybe they'd needed that space so we could find our way back different, better. Sometimes love needs quiet the way seeds need winter. I never replied to that text back then. But if I could now, I think I'd just write one line back. Thank you for the space. It helped me grow too. A few days later, Eddie called again. Dad, he said, you mind if we stop by tomorrow? There's something I want to talk about. Sure, I said. Everything all right? Yeah, it's good news, I think. You'll see. He sounded nervous, but in that hopeful way people get when they've got something big to say. Next day, he showed up with Sarah and Lily. They were dressed nicer than usual, and I couldn't help but notice Sarah was holding a folder like it was something delicate. They came in, sat around the table, exchanged a few glances. Eddie finally said, So, we've been thinking about moving back to this area. Not far, just the next town over, closer to you. I nearly dropped my coffee. Sarah smiled. Lily starts middle school next year, and we figured it might be nice having family nearby. Plus, we found a house that needs a little work, and I seem to remember someone who's handy with a hammer. I laughed, really laughed, full belly and all. Well, I'll be damned, you're moving back? If it all works out, Eddie said. We wanted to make sure you'd be okay with that. I leaned back and grinned. Son, you could pitch a tent in the yard for all I care. You're always welcome here. Lily clapped her hands. Can we still come over and fish? Sweetheart, I said, you can fish in the bathtub if you want. They all laughed, and for a while it felt like the whole house joined in, the walls, the air, even the floorboards seemed to hum with approval. After they left, I sat back down on the porch and thought about the long road it took to get here. All those years of silence, hurt feelings, pride, misunderstandings, all of it seemed so small now, like pebbles you trip on and forget about once you see the mountain. Funny thing about getting older, the list of things you think matter gets shorter every year. And I realized that if I'd learned anything worth passing on, it was this. Love isn't always a straight line. Sometimes it bends. Sometimes it breaks. Sometimes it circles back after you've already given up. The trick is keeping the porch light on, just in case it finds its way home. Later that evening, I got a message on my phone. It was from Eddie. No words, just a picture. It was Lily sitting at her new desk in what looked like a half-painted room. On the wall behind her was her family tree, taped up crookedly, with a big red heart drawn next to my name. Underneath the photo, he'd written, "We're home." I must have stared at that picture for 10 minutes straight, smiling like a fool. Then I typed back, "Told you I'd keep the porch light on." A week later, they moved in. I helped unpack boxes, fixed a loose hinge or two, even taught Lily how to use a level properly. The house they bought was old, needed love, patience, and a few good stories to fill it up again. One afternoon while we were painting, Eddie said, "You know, I almost didn't send that text back then." "Oh, yeah?" I said. "What made you send it?" He looked down at his brush. "Fear, mostly. I thought space would fix things. I didn't realize it would hurt worse before it got better." I nodded. "Well, sometimes pain's just growth that forgot its manners." He chuckled. "Yeah, maybe. Still, I'm sorry for how I said it, for how long it took me to reach back." I put a hand on his shoulder. "I'm sorry, too, for the things I didn't say soon enough. But hey, we found our way back. That's what counts." He smiled. "Guess so." When we finished painting that day, I stood back and looked at the wall, pale blue, sunlight catching it just right. It hit me then how life has this funny way of circling you back to the beginning just so you can see it clearer. I started this year feeling abandoned, broken, ready to fade into my own silence. Now I had my family back, forgiveness in my bones, and a peace I'd never known before. And I could almost hear Marlene whispering through it all, "See, Walt, you did good." A few days later, Joanne called again. "Got a surprise for you," she said. "Oh, Lord," I said, laughing. "Last time you said that, I ended up with an envelope from beyond the grave." "This one's less dramatic," she said. "Town's having a community fair next weekend. They're honoring volunteers and folks who've lived here 50-plus years. Guess who made the list?" I chuckled. 50 years? I'm practically part of the landscape at this point." "Well," she said, "you're getting a certificate and everything. You better show up. I already told them you'd make a speech." "You did what?" "Relax," she said. "Just a few words about what this place means to you." I groaned, but deep down I didn't mind. Maybe it was time I said something worth remembering. The day of the fair came bright and breezy. There were food trucks, kids running wild, old friends I hadn't seen in decades. They'd set up a little stage near the gazebo. When they called my name, I walked up slow, careful of the creaky knees, and looked out at the faces. My neighbors, Joanne, Eddie, Sarah, little Lily waving like she was trying to signal a ship. I cleared my throat. "Well," I said, "I wasn't expecting to be up here today. Figured I was done with speeches when I retired. But seeing as I've been tricked into it, I'll make it count." A few laughs. I took a breath. I've lived in this town most of my life, watched it change, watched people come and go. Some I still miss, some I still talk to, even if nobody can see 'em anymore. That got a quiet chuckle. "I've made mistakes," I went on. "Lost people I loved, said things I shouldn't, and left things unsaid that mattered more. But what I've learned, what I hope some of you young ones remember, is that it's never too late to fix what's broken. Time won't wait for you, but forgiveness will. And love, well, it's like a porch light. You leave it on and somehow it finds its way back home." When I stepped down, Eddie was clapping, eyes a little wet. Lily threw her arms around my waist. "Grandpa," she whispered, "you sounded like a movie." I laughed. "Let's hope it's one with a happy ending." That night, after everyone had gone, I sat out on the porch again. The fair lights were still faintly glowing in the distance, the crickets singing their tired song. I looked up at the stars and thought about everything that brought me here. Every mistake, every letter, every word I wished I'd said sooner. And I realized something simple. Maybe the point of getting older isn't understanding everything that happened. Maybe it's learning to hold the parts that still don't make sense and love them anyway. Because that's what family really is. Not perfect people, but people who keep showing up. I reached up and tapped that last envelope on the mantel through the open window. "You did good, Walt." "Yeah," I said softly to the night. I think we all did. The wind shifted then, gentle, cool, and for just a second I swear I could smell lilacs and laundry soap, faint and familiar. I smiled. "Good night, Marlene." The summer slipped into fall before I even realized it. The maple out front turned red first. It always did. And then the air began to carry that faint bite that makes you reach for an old sweater without thinking. The porch smelled like dried leaves and coffee grounds. I'd always liked that smell. It made me feel like I was still part of something alive. Eddie's family had settled into their new place down the road. They stopped by often, sometimes with pie, sometimes just with stories. The house that used to echo now felt full again, not with noise, but with the kind of presence that hums quiet and steady. Lily had started middle school. She called me every few days, usually with some big crisis about math or a funny story about her teacher. One afternoon, she showed up with a recorder, the kind every kid has to learn, and insisted on performing the Ode to Joy right there on my porch. It was the worst rendition I'd ever heard, and I loved every second of it. After she finished, she looked at me proudly. "So, how'd I do?" I clapped like she was playing at Carnegie Hall. "You just about brought Beethoven back from the dead," she giggled. "Mom says you used to sing." I raised an eyebrow. "Did she now?" "She said you and Grandma Marlene used to sing old country songs when you cooked." I smiled at that memory. "Well, that's true enough. I can't promise it was in tune, though. Will you sing for me sometime?" "Maybe," I said, "but you've got to promise not to tell anyone if I do." She laughed. "Deal." That was how things were now. Simple, steady, full of small moments that somehow felt like everything. One evening in late September, Eddie stopped by alone. He had that look again. Not bad news this time, just something big on his mind. "Dad," he said, "Sarah's been talking about maybe buying the old Miller property down by the creek. It's got a lot of land. We thought we might start fixing it up, build something for the future, you know." "Sounds like a good plan," I said. "Well," he continued, "I was thinking, maybe once it's all set up, we could move you in closer. There's room to build you a little cottage on the back lot. You'd still have your space, but you wouldn't be alone out here." I smiled, appreciating the thought. "That's mighty kind of you, son. But this place, it's home. I've got more ghosts than furniture here, and they're all friendly these days." He nodded, not pushing. "I figured you'd say that. Just wanted you to know the offer's open." "I know," I said, "and I'm grateful." We sat in the fading light listening to the crickets and the soft rush of the creek. It reminded me of when he was little. All those evenings we'd sit out here and talk about nothing that mattered and everything that did. After a long silence, he said, "Dad, can I ask you something kind of hard?" "Sure. Back when you got that text from me, when I said we needed space, did you hate me?" I thought about it. Not the question itself, but how to answer it truthfully. "I didn't hate you," I said slowly. "I hated what it felt like I'd failed somehow, like I'd been written out of my own story. But hate's too heavy to carry for long. I was hurt. That's all." He nodded. "I was angry that year, at everything, at losing Mom, at work, at myself. I didn't know how to handle it. I thought if we got space, we'd all start feeling better. But it just made the silence louder." "I know," I said. "And for what it's worth, that silence taught me things too. Sometimes losing connection makes you understand what it really means." He looked at me for a long moment, eyes shining. "You've changed, Dad," I chuckled. "Getting old'll do that to a man." "No," he said, "I mean, you sound peaceful, like you made peace with all of it." "Maybe I finally did," I said. That night after he left, I sat in my chair on the porch and watched the stars come out one by one. There's a rhythm to life you start to notice once you stop rushing, like the way the sun sets a little earlier each day, but somehow it never feels sudden. The air was cool enough that I could see my breath when I sighed. The old dog, the neighbor's mutt who'd sort of adopted me, lay at my feet. I said to him, "You know, buddy, I think I finally figured it out. The space my boy asked for, it wasn't punishment, it was room for both of us to grow into who we needed to be." He thumped his tail once as if he agreed. "Funny thing," I went on, "you spend your whole life trying to hold on to people, thinking love's about keeping them close, but it's not. It's about giving them enough space to find their way back when they're ready." The dog looked up at me, yawned, and went back to sleep. Smartest audience I ever had. October came. The trees turned fire red and gold. I found myself out back more, cleaning up the garden, stacking wood, just keeping busy. One morning I decided to finally fix the old birdhouse Marlene had built years ago. The roof had rotted, and the post leaned like it was tired of standing. As I worked, I could hear her voice in my head, soft but bossy. "Don't you dare toss that, Walt. You fix it. Everything can be fixed if you care enough." So I did. Sanded it, patched it, painted it the same pale blue she'd loved. When I hung it back up, I felt this quiet satisfaction that went deeper than pride, like something had been set right again. That night I sat under it and waited. The wind moved through the trees, and I thought about all the fixing I'd done lately. Not with tools, but with words and forgiveness. Some repairs. I realized don't need nails, just time and truth. A few weeks later, Joanne came by with old photo albums she'd found in her attic. We sat at the kitchen table, flipping through them, laughing at the haircuts and the clothes. Then she pointed to one picture. Me, young and wild-eyed, sitting in a rusty truck with Marlene beside me, her hand on my arm. "Look at that," Joanne said. "You two look like you owned the world." "Felt like it too," I said, smiling. She closed the album. "You know, Walt, you've done right by her, by all of us." I shook my head. "I just stumbled my way through." "That's all any of us ever do," she said. "You just happened to do it with a little grace at the end." I smiled at that, though it hit deeper than she probably realized. The days started getting shorter. I could feel the chill creeping in through the windows at night, but it didn't bother me much. The house didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt full. Sometimes I'd talk out loud to Marlene when the quiet got thick. Not because I expected her to answer, but because I liked the sound of her name in the air. One night I said, "You were right, you know, about everything. Eddie found his way. I found mine. We're all right now." The next morning, when I stepped onto the porch, I saw something hanging from the mailbox. A little wren's feather caught in the hinge. Marlene loved wrens. Said they were messengers of good news. I took the feather, smiled, and tucked it into the edge of her picture frame on the mantel. "Message received," I whispered. Winter came gentle that year. No blizzards, just a steady rhythm of frost on the windows and smoke from the chimney. I kept the fireplace going, baked more than I should have, and started writing again. Not letters this time, just small notes to myself. Things I wanted Eddie and Lily to know someday. Simple things like, don't rush forgiveness. It shows up when you're ready to carry it. Love doesn't always sound like "I love you." Sometimes it sounds like "I made you coffee." When you lose someone, don't fill the silence too quick. There's meaning in quiet. I kept them in a little wooden box by my chair. Maybe one day, when I'm gone, Eddie will find them and understand a few things I never said out loud. In late January, we all gathered at Eddie's for Sunday dinner. The house smelled like roast chicken and fresh bread. Sarah was laughing, Lily was telling a story about her science fair project, and for a moment I just sat back and watched. Really watched. I saw Marlene in all of them. In Sarah's kindness, in Eddie's patience, in Lily's light. When dinner was over, Lily climbed onto my lap and whispered, "Grandpa, I think Grandma would be proud of us." I smiled, my throat tight. "I think she already is, sweetheart." She nodded, serious as could be. Then we did good. "Yeah," I said softly. "We did good." A few weeks later, a letter came in the mail. Real paper, real stamp. I didn't recognize the handwriting. It was from a woman named Anita. I froze before opening it. That name like a ripple from another lifetime. The letter was short. "Dear Walt, I heard through Joanne that you're still in town. I was passing through a few weeks ago and saw your name on the community fair flyer. It made me smile. I wanted to say thank you for the words you never sent. Joanne told me you found them. I never knew you'd written any. I'm glad you found happiness. I did too in my own way. Take care of yourself, Walt. You were always better at loving people than you gave yourself credit for. Anita." I sat there a long time with that letter in my hands. It didn't stir up old wounds like I feared. It just closed a circle that had been open too long. I folded it neatly, tucked it into the wooden box with the notes, and whispered, "Goodbye, old friend." Now, sitting here on my porch, same chair, same view, I can feel the years behind me like a quilt. Every patch a story, every stitch a piece of someone I loved. The sun's going down slow over the trees, the sky that warm honey color Marlene always liked. I can hear laughter from down the road, Eddie and Lily in the yard calling the dog, clinking dishes. And I think about how this all started. A text message that felt like an ending. But it wasn't. It was the beginning of learning how to let go, how to listen, how to love again without holding too tight. It was the start of understanding that space doesn't mean absence. It means room enough to grow. If I've got any wisdom left to give, it's this. Don't be afraid of silence. Don't fear distance. Love finds its way through both. And if someone ever tells you they need space, let them have it. But leave your porch light on, because one day they just might find their way home. The last of the sun slips below the trees now. I take a deep breath, the air cool and kind. I whisper, "We did good, Marlene." Then I close my eyes, let the quiet settle, and smile, because for the first time in my life, the quiet doesn't feel empty. It feels full.